Hey, friends, welcome back to yet another exciting episode of Friends of the Squared Circle. I'm your host, Crander Q, aka my real name, the number one beard in all of pro wrestling. That's right, pro wrestling. Best beard, self proclaimed. But who can take it away from me? Nobody, because it is self proclaimed. I just want to show off this awesome award that I got from our friends over at 13 Cards Subject to Change, the number one beard in all of pro wrestling. Again, self proclaimed. Let's not forget to mention our sister shows of Wrestling with Pride and Bell to Bell, who will be returning for seasons 2 in 2026. The Cheese is joining us, everyone. He is here to talk about his wrestling fandom. And one more plug before we start this, we got to mention our sponsors, one of them being Darren Corbin, who was on the show The Floor, as well as Inside Out Nutrition and Superior Creations for all their custom tumblers. But Cheese, how are you doing today?
I couldn't be better. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I've been hunting you down for the last year. I'm excited to jump into this. You've done a lot over the last year. If anyone who is following his social medias, you're everywhere lately. But let's just dive into it. What's your first earliest wrestling memory?
First earliest wrestling memory, just in general, was watching old NWA on an antenna in the woods of North Florida with my grandparents.
Okay.
My grandparents were huge wrestling fans, and they're the ones who got me into it.
Okay, so grandma allowed you to watch it. Mine didn't because she thought it was bad for me, but it looks like yours let you watch it there on the antenna. Man, that sounds so old and archaic. You know, kids, buckle up. We might go back to the 80s. It's scary to say that was 40 years ago.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's wild to think about. It's like last time I went back home, I actually saw the old antenna that we used to.
Mhm.
Me and my dad would be out there kind of turning it, and
Yep.
you'd hear, "All right, yeah, that's good."
Yep. And do you remember those huge satellites that people had in their backyards and they were the rich kids? Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Yep. And now we can just turn on our phone, pull up YouTube, and watch a wrestling match of pretty much anyone that is in the business today that has it out there. So
I really kind of implore any of your younger listeners or anybody who's listening, like, you don't know how good you have it. And I'm not saying that in a old man shaking a stick at you kind of way. I'm
yeah,
saying it in more of a kind of way of, this is a beautiful time to be a pro wrestling fan because you have everything.
yes,
Back in the early 90s, I had to wait to see what we could catch on the antenna. I had to
hmm
do tape trading with my
yep,
friends. And I recorded stuff during the Monday Night Wars. I had a at my because my parents and grandparents luckily lived
mhm.
on the same property out in
Okay,
the woods. And so I would sneak off to my grandparents' house to watch wrestling. But while I was there, I would turn on a tape to
hmm
record Raw at my parents' house,
hmm
and then at my grandparents' house, I would record WCW. Now, all those tapes have been destroyed because if I had them, I would exploit them greedily all the
yep,
time and talk
hmm
about everything. But
yep,
there's also like you'd have to buy one of the after mags, or at the time WCW had a
hmm
magazine and WWF had a magazine. And so you could look at the results,
yep,
and names became familiar to me. And for a long time there were certain faces that were not familiar to me because I
hmm
only knew names on certain
yep,
superstars. So I say to everyone who has all of this information, all this tape, all of this audio, all this commentary at their fingertips, I commend you. I'm happy for you. I want each generation to be better than the last. And I think
mhm.
it's great that it's the best time to be a fan right now.
Yeah, and I was one of those kids that would stand in, Kmart and read the weekly magazine or monthly magazine or whatever it was and be like, oh, well, that guy's in the top 10. He's got to be good. And I was just like, well, that's my favorite, you know. And then I finally, because I was invited over to a random kid's house at the time and played Sega and thought it was like Mortal Kombat. Um, and I was like, wow, these characters are cool. And then he brought out like a buttload of action figures, the Hasbros, the LJNs and stuff. I'm like, oh, they have toys for
Yeah.
this too. And then I finally saw it on TV. I was like, oh, this is an actual thing. And my uncles, shame on them for never telling me about it because they also enjoyed it. And I would watch like pay-per-view a time or two at grandpa's house, the WCW, the big one with Hogan and Sting. And like, you guys like this? I like this. Why did no one tell me? So.
I remember at my other grandmother's house, who was vehemently opposed to wrestling. She
Hmm.
owned a daycare, and so anything that had even a tinge of violence to it,
Hmm.
she was completely opposed to, which I understand. You don't
Hmm.
want to promote that kind of stuff when you're running a daycare in your home, but
Right.
she had her own little library for the daycare, which was beside the laundry room, and you could just go through all these books. And some parents would drop off books and donate them, and my grandma at a certain point got to where she couldn't keep up with them,
Hmm.
so she wouldn't monitor which ones would come in, but if there was anything that had wrestling or comics or whatever, she wouldn't allow it in because she didn't want parents to be like, hey, what are you letting my kid read,
Right.
but I snagged a couple of times. I snagged some comics and she didn't care. She just let me, she's like, you can't read it here, you can't
Hmm.
hang
Yeah.
out with it here. But there was a wrestling book that it was WWF forward, but it didn't have any like WWF licensing to it.
Hmm.
And it was, I picked it up, read it one time, and hid it. And then the next time I was there, I couldn't find it. So I spent like 2 hours looking for it,
Hmm.
just desperately. And this is like 1991 or something.
Yeah.
And I'm just desperately looking for this book. And then I just kind of like sidled up to my grandma and I'm like, hey, did you see a wrestling book in here? Would somebody leave a wrestling book? She's like, oh, yeah, I gave it to so and so. And I'm just like,
Oh,
come on,
grandma.
come on, grandma. But it was, that's the type of feverish
Hmm.
fandom that you had back in those
Yeah.
days where you're just like, you're looking for anything you can get your hands on. And now it's not the opposite, but I feel a sense of overwhelm. So I have to
Oh, yeah.
kind of like chapterize, if that's a word, or like I have to split it up and compartmentalize everything into each and every time I go and look at a certain thing in wrestling. Like if I'm looking up
Hmm.
a promo, mostly it's like most of my time is spent looking up Dusty and Sting matches and promos.
Two
That's my
great
whole
names. Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and like I said, I am so happy for for everybody. I won't say just
Hmm.
kids, but everybody who's a
Yeah.
wrestling fan right now. It's the absolute best.
Yeah, and you can watch your independent, on the Fight app, which we should totally be sponsored by them now that we drop them on these 100 views we get. But yeah, it's just so readily available. And to segue back to the comic books, do you remember those WWF comic books with like the Ultimate Warrior and Boss Man, and I believe it was like the Undertaker was in
There
one
was an
too, or
Undertaker
yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah.
I
Those
s-
were like mint. I remember finding one of those at like a dollar store and like over the moon because they had a WWF comic book.
Well, my favorite type of show to go to is any kind of, it doesn't necessarily have to be a wrestling con, but if it's
Mhm.
an anime con or a comic con or whatever kind of con that people are into, and there's a wrestling element to it, meaning they have wrestling matches there or
Mhm.
they have people who will guest and do tables and stuff there. I love going on those. Like that's my favorite because I love looking every con that you go
Mhm.
to. Inevitably, there's at least one collector or seller that has a table that's full of just old nostalgic
Mhm.
wrestling stuff, and there's always the big bin with all the
Yep.
beat up LJN or
Mhm.
Hasbro wrestling toys, which is so fun to go through, especially if you even if you do it by yourself, it's cool. But like if you
Yep.
got a buddy that's into that, like that you just split time going through that kind of
Mhm.
stuff, and you can occasionally find some of those comics. And I was at MegaCon 2 years ago and I found an Undertaker comic, but it was one of those things where I was working the show also. So
Mhm.
I had a second to do it and it was like I didn't have I was in gear because
Oh, gotcha.
and I love doing that too, by the way, like running around in gear. People enjoy it or they seem to, and it's
Mhm.
all cons are all about fun, especially those big ones like that. But um I sat that down. I was like, "Hey, I'll be back." And then I went. I had my match. Got back to my table, signed some autographs, took some pictures, that kind of stuff. And then when I went to go back, it was gone. So I was like,
Oh,
somebody else knew like what the at least the nostalgic value of this
mhm.
thing.
Yeah, definitely. Before we get way too off track here, let's kind of dive into your fandom. Who were those first couple of wrestlers that stood out to you in pro wrestling? You mentioned Dusty Rhodes. I was a Dusty guy, Gold Dust guy. But for you, who was it that stood out?
The biggest is Sting.
Okay.
I will credit and talk to anybody about Sting any chance I get, because Sting is my biggest inspiration as a pro wrestler. He's the biggest, earliest part of my fandom.
Hmm.
Real quick side note, I won't steer us too far off the tracks, but
It's fine.
my my papa, my grandfather, my maternal grandfather was my maternal grandparents that I went and watched wrestling with, and my
Hmm.
papa was he was a man's man, like he's a World War II vet.
Hmm.
Um, he was in the coal mines, went to World War II. When he was done with his time of the war, when the war was over, he went back to the coal mines, West Virginia, and then he was a mechanic for the rest of his life, and did a lot of different things with his hands. And that to
Hmm.
me is the just like that's a real there's
Hmm.
measure of a man is many faceted, but for him, I always looked up to him as just like this guy is the guy. And he was a huge Sting fan. He hated Hulk Hogan. He didn't care for Hulk Hogan at all. Like anybody would try and put
Hmm.
Hulk Hogan in his face, he was just like, I don't care. Sting is my guy.
Hmm.
And so then Sting became my favorite of all time. And what was really surreal is at a River City Wrestling Con, and
Hmm.
was able to. I had my table there. It was opposite side of Sting. I got to meet
Nice.
him, talk to him, take a picture with him, everything, and it was just the coolest moment. Like as
Hmm.
a because. Make no mistake, as a pro wrestler, we get into this
Hmm.
because we're fans of it. Now, there are
Yep.
other people who have other reasons, and
Exactly. Yep.
that's totally fine. But I got into this because I am a massive fan of it, and
Hmm.
that was a just a explosive moment for me.
Yeah. And I bet that like that brought all the memories back of you and your grandpa watching it with the antenna,
Yeah.
swinging that thing around just so you could watch Sting. Now, is there an incarnation of I can't say the word. Let's move on from the big words. But was there a favorite Sting of yours, like Surfer, Crow, Joker, AEW Sting? I loved Surfer Sting because he was with Luger. I thought they were like the greatest tag team in the world back then. But what Sting did you prefer?
It was, a close second is Surfer Sting, but I
Okay.
have to go with Crow Sting,
Okay. Yeah.
because Crow Sting was like just he was the savior of WCW. And
Hmm.
as a kid, I was just like, the NWO's here, somebody's got to come out and save us. And it was always somebody's just
Hmm.
mercilessly ringing the bell, and the
Yeah.
NWO's beating, pounding down on the good guy, and just whoever it was. And when Sting would drop down from the rafters, like I would stand up more than I
Yeah.
stand up when I watch football or any wrestling
Mhm.
now or anything. And I would just be like, oh my God, it's Sting. I was yelling more than Tony Schiavone was.
Yeah.
It's Sting.
That's awesome. So we're going to fast forward now to a little bit more recent. Is there anybody in the business that you like and kind of gravitate towards now that Sting is done? I'm a huge Otis fan. Everyone knows that from watching the show. You're kind of new to watching or seeing anything from us, but he's from the town that I live in. So, like, I'm not obsessed. I'm not a stalker. I crashed his mom's birthday party. We know Noah. But is there anybody that stands out to you in pro wrestling today that your fandom kind of goes to?
Um, you know, that's actually kind of that's a really good question. I do love Otis. Since you mentioned him, I'll give him a shout out. Like, such a crazy cool way to do, like,
Hmm.
if you want to call it comedy or you want to call it
Yep.
whatever style, but just like a really fun character. He's like, if they would just turn him loose, he would
Yep.
be wrestling's Chris Farley. Like, he's that
Yeah.
hilarious, but also, like, if you looked at Chris Farley back in the day, like, he was a physically intimidating threat.
Hmm.
So he's like that, but even bigger and stronger. But who I would have to say that's a current, this is kind of a layup, but it's Cody.
Oh,
He's
okay.
been on the
Yeah,
scene
I
for a
like
long
Cody. Yep.
time, but Cody Rhodes, obviously, because his dad being the American Dream,
Hmm.
him being the American Nightmare, him marrying those two things, full
Yep.
stop, and just being that hero that kids need. And he's all, with, it's not just the hair, but it's also a little bit of the build and a lot of the
Mhm.
athleticism. But he kind of reminds me of a Surfer Sting a little bit here and
Oh,
there.
okay. Yeah, yeah. I love the Rhodes family. You can't see it, but behind me, I've got my Dustin AEW stuff because it's new. I
Awesome.
wanted to get it. with the red, the blue, just because obviously every Goldust figure is gold, and black. But yeah, I've got Dusty tattooed by my elbow. I've got Goldust tattooed. All my friends joke I should get the neck tattoo like Cody. They ain't gonna get the neck tattoo.
Totally
But yeah,
should.
I do love the Rhodes family. One of my favorite memories as a kid. Well, at the time wasn't favorite because when Ted DiBiase stole Sweet Sapphire, I was legit pissed at $1 Million Man and wanted to fight him at like 12 years old. I could have took him. I could have took that stupid $1 Million belt. I was that mad. And when I finally met Ted, I was like, look, I like you now, but as a 12-year-old, I wanted to beat the living out of you, brother. And he just laughed and he said, "That's cool." Blah blah blah. I'll have to send you a picture off after the show of the chair my buddy Bob made and
Please
stuff
do.
for him. But yeah, wrestling it the families. You've got the basically the Samoan dynasty. There's so many. You've got the Rose, the Hearts. Is there anyone particular as a kid, now this is fake kayfabe or whatever words we use here, folks, that you just despise? Like I said, Ted DiBiase was one for me, but was there anybody you just wanted to go through the TV as a child and just wrestle and beat up?
Um, as a family, I would say, I mean, this is closer to a family. I mean, this is before all of the current worship that we have of the Ric
Mm.
Flair promos, but it's like part of the Horsemen, the Anderson family, I
Oh,
guess you could
okay.
say. So part of, at that when both Ole and Arn were part of Anderson family, were both part of the Horsemen, and
Mhm.
there'll always be original Horsemen, but it's like
Yeah.
I despise them, and what I realized later was I despised them because Arn was so good, and I despise Ole because he was just so nasty. You know what I mean? Like he's
Yeah.
just a nasty, just the type of guy that you could hate, and he was doing his job.
Yeah, I used to tell people Arn Anderson was my dad. So I liked Arn. And I told him that down in Tampa, and he just kind of laughed. Lex Luger was like, that's something to be embarrassed about, like to give him crap. But I mean, it's too funny. I used to tell people that was my dad, but I loved WCW as a kid. It was more my favorite. But then obviously after they were bought out, I focused more on WWE. But let's kind of talk quick about how you came up with your name, your gimmick, stuff like that. We'll kind of touch on it briefly because other podcasts will ask you about your favorite match, how you came up with everything. I just want to kind of get, a couple sound bites here. But how did you come up with the cheese? I'm a
Well,
Wisconsin guy, by the way, folks. I love cheese like it's going out of style. And yeah, go ahead.
good source of protein, a culinary device that can't be beat.
It's the best.
It's funny. Yeah, there's a couple of different kayfabe versions I tell people, and the first one is the shortest. The first one is because when I watched wrestling, I grew up in the woods, we grew up poor,
Mhm.
but I didn't know it as a kid. I had everything that I needed.
Right.
I was just, you're as a kid, you don't really know it, but then you look back on it later. I'm like, oh, my parents were struggling, but they did their best.
Mhm.
And my grandmother got the old school government cheese. It came in this silver
Okay.
wrapper and it said government cheese, 1 pound. And it was just, but it's delicious. It was so good. And we would eat government cheese and crackers when
Mhm.
we watched old NWA and then eventually WCW. Um, that is a true story, but it's sometimes a kayfabe story that I'll tell
Okay.
people. But the real origin story that's inside wrestling, inside baseball, if you will, I was trained by the great and powerful Jay Lethal. He in every person's part of their training, we go
Mhm.
through you go through the physical aspects and the fundamentals, and some people don't realize that this part could be the hardest part for a wrestler on their journey, and that's the
Mhm.
promo class. And we had our first promo class, and I'd been cutting promos in front of a mirror since I was a little kid, so it wasn't an issue to me. I don't have any
Mhm.
issues public speaking. I'd done a lot of that before I was trained to become a wrestler and everything. And I talked about Chris Farley earlier and the
Mhm.
similarities with him and Otis, but there's an old Saturday Night Live sketch where Chris Farley, he is Matt Foley, a motivational speaker, and if you don't get your life right, you're going to be living in a van down by the river and on a steady supply of government cheese. So I borrowed that as part of my promo because in wrestling you don't steal, you borrow.
Mhm.
And a big part of that, promo was I was a heel, so to speak, and I said, why do all of you people in here look, smell, and act like you're on a steady supply of government cheese? And it made some people laugh, and Jay seemed to like it, and he,
Yeah.
then you have to critique. He, as our trainer, had to critique us in front
Mhm.
of the rest of our peers, which is a real
Right.
gut wrenching thing, no matter how not nervous or nervous you are in front of
Mhm.
people speaking. And he said, I liked it. That was good. You seem like you were pretty mad about that government cheese, though. And it just stuck. He kept calling me government cheese, and
Mhm.
eventually he just started calling me cheese. And I decided that, I'm the cheese, and that's the way it's going to be. And 3 cheese tattoos later, I am the
Mhm.
cheese.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's unique. I mean, there's, guys with just first and last names. There's guys with just single names. And then now you're bringing in the food in the forefront. And like I said, I'm a Wisconsin guy. I love cheese. We probably get the big bag every time we go to the store. And my wife's like, "Are you sure you need that?" Like, it's going to be gone in a week. And I get a little sad when we don't have cheese in the house because I literally put it on everything. Oh, we're having tacos, cheese. Oh, we're having some ramen. I'm gonna mix in some cheese. Oh, nachos. Let's make 3 layers of cheese, and then I'll melt cheese purposely in the oven so it's a little crispier,
There
and
you
add
go.
tomato or jalapenos or hot sauce.
Boy.
It's a thing. It's probably why my stomach has finally said, "Look, big guy, the milk and the dairy is not good for you anymore," but I keep eating it. I can't stop. So, and some of the pictures that you have out there, folks, I implore you to go follow him and check out his photos. They're great. The one with the Polaroid, and then that trend that was going around a few years ago of people throwing craft singles at babies. It's the best videos out there. It's not child abuse. It is hilarious. It's basically cheese abuse because they're throwing it at an infant that can't eat it, but I just think it's hilarious. And if you could just sign craft singles, 244, you get 28 of them, you cash that in, you've made almost $60. You know what I mean? And they got to come back and get another one because eventually that is going, I don't think it's going to mold, but
No,
it's
it's just hard.
hilarious. I love it. It's
I
great.
I have kids that I've been doing this long enough now where
Mm.
I've seen some kids kind of grow up, going
Yep.
from their preteens to their teens, from being a little kid to being a teenager, so on and so forth. But there's this one kid, actually, there might be a couple of them, but it's happened a couple of different times. They bring the same piece of cheese, and I've signed it like 6 or 7 times. They just take it home, put it in the refrigerator, and they're ecstatic. They love it.
Yep.
And the parents looking at me like, hey, come here, this kid won't let go of this cheese.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
I'm not doing anything. Talk to the chemicals that are in it. I'm getting my signature. So, sorry, folks. But yeah, I think it's great. Before we wrap up here, let's kind of talk about the Savannah Bananas. Like I said, hopefully we get you on to a second part of this and, continue to talk about your wrestling and
Love it.
fandom and stuff. But how did the Savannah Bananas all come together? Because I love baseball. More as a kid, I've kind of grew out of it because wrestling has taken the forefront here. But, how did that all come together? And if you're not watching Savannah Bana, I can't say it. If you're not watching, it is like the greatest thing in the last year or two to be out there. But kind of dive into that for us before we wrap up here.
Well, I'm in the same boat as you. I was a huge baseball fan, and around the same time that I was a huge wrestling fan. Of course, I stayed a huge wrestling fan, with the exception of like my last 2 years of high school. I kind of drifted out of it,
Hmm.
and I'd float back in and out. But I call those the lost years, and I enjoy watching stuff back. But anyway, all roads lead back to a gentleman called the Young Professor, and he's an accomplished indie wrestling announcer, but he's more than just an announcer. He's a host. He hypes up the crowd. You get more than your money's worth if you hire the young professor Matt Grafer. And we didn't actually get a chance to work together on the independent circuit.
Mhm.
On one of the shows that he was on, I never got to work with him, but we knew each other and we were friendly. And he saw me and he was like, "I think Banana Ball needs the cheese." And I was like, "Okay." And conversations had started, and just prior to that
Mhm.
conversation, the Bananas were playing in Tampa, and I live in the Tampa area, and they had a game at George Steinbrenner Field, which is across from Raymond James Stadium, where the Bucks play, which we
Okay.
sold
Yep.
out last year, 67,000 people. But this was about 3 years ago, and I came up and did a man tryout, which is kind of foreshadowing to what I'd become later. And
Mhm.
I did a goofy dance, and it was silly, and it got a little bit of a reaction, and it worked.
Yep.
I had a lot of fun, and I didn't expect anything to come out of it. And then here we go. A couple of years later, he calls me. We get in on the situation with the Bananas together. We talk about it, and he's like, "Would love for you to come on the road." I was like, "I know that you guys are the Bananas, but I don't want to change uh, from the cheese."
Mhm.
And he was just like, "I don't think we change from the cheese. I think you
Mhm.
stay the cheese." And I was like, "Okay, great."
Yep.
Because this is who I am now. Like, I
Yep.
can't change it. And not because I'm like, don't want to. It's just like, this is literally who I am. This is me turned up
Yep.
to 11. Sometimes I have to turn it down to a 7, but this is
Yep.
me through and through. And, um, several hundred thousands of people later being on the Tonight Show and being on Good Morning America and ESPN and all these different outlets, all that later, I'm still Manana. I'm gearing up for the 2026 season. I'm
I'm
super
so
stoked about
excited
it.
for you, man. Like, that's
Thank
great.
you.
And Cena came through. Were you able to at least talk with him? I mean, were you able to get close?
So
Did
I
you actually
actually,
see him? I mean, let's
I,
throw the dumb joke out there, but
we actually, so I didn't get to see him during the season where he came and played because that was
okay.
one season before I got to go out there.
Oh, okay.
But they did. I don't know if I'm supposed to say it, but I don't really care. Nick Khan came to one of our games,
Okay.
and he had a suite. He has family there. It was really cool to see him, and it was a really interesting experience. And he, I don't know this for sure, and I can't say this for sure, but I think that he helped hook us up with some tickets to SummerSlam in New Jersey.
Nice.
May have been him, may have been some other anonymous person. We have some connections there. Young Professor's got deep, deep connections everywhere.
Mhm.
So it could have been his own connections, but I have a feeling Nick Khan might have had something to do with it. Either way, it was cool meeting him, and we got to go to SummerSlam, myself and some of the other Bananas, and we hung out. We had a great time just being fans, but we got to go
Yep.
backstage, and
Nice.
I got to meet Jelly Roll because that was when he was
Oh,
working, and then I also got to meet John Cena, and
okay.
that was
Perfect. Perfect.
didn't get the picture,
Yep.
but I did get to shake his hand and say thank you for everything that you've done for the business, and
Yep.
just it was just a really cool, surreal moment, and I loved it. He was just as kind and just as professional as you would imagine.
Mhm. Yeah, and he does get kind of that bad rap because people will post those clips, but that's just everything in life. But I mean, when you get to that star power, you've got to have that on and off switch. And I totally agree with him. Like, hey, this is the 5 minutes that I get to myself. Please respect that.
Right, right, right.
Um,
Yeah,
I don't know how a man that is so renowned by the world would be able to act, because I always jokingly say, yeah, I want to make money off this podcast, but there's no way in hell I could be famous, because it'd be like, boundaries, like, just go, like, I just need you away from me right now. But
right. Yeah, I
who
get
knows,
it.
but I'm excited for you and the 2026 season, because I do enjoy the pictures. Like you said, you got to do the Tonight Show and go to like the wrestling and stuff. It's got to be just an experience of being that baseball fan. I mean, more in the 2090s, that was my jam with, the Diamondbacks with Randy Johnson, Kurt Schilling, and Pedro Martinez and guys like that. Like I just loved watching the Atlanta Braves on TBS because, again, Ted Turner and WCW.
Yep.
So,
I was a Braves guy.
but yeah, I am excited for you. It's so great that you're able to mix your wrestling with other stuff, not only to get more eyes on you and the Bananas, but just to have fun in life and say that this wrestling, uh, took you to these places. It's phenomenal, So, and I do a couple small things with the podcast, like having, a local rapper out of Minneapolis or Matt McCarthy, stand-up comedian who wrote for WWE and, is on TV and movies. So, it's just interesting the things we get to do because of wrestling. So,
Awesome.
yeah. So, but before we, tune out here, where can people find you? Anything you want to promote? The floor is yours. I'm going to hit you with one hard question before we get out of here, and then we'll wrap her up.
All right. Well, you can see me this weekend twice. There are two opportunities. If you're in Florida, we'll be at the
Okay.
Lakeland Civic Center. They don't call it that anymore. It's called the RP Funding Center. It's in
Okay.
Lakeland. It's the Central Florida Comic Con. It was very well attended last year. Had a lot of fun there last year. There were a lot of old school wrestlers that had tables and they were hanging out. But there is a show. It's provided by Thunder Championship Wrestling. I will be entering in the battle royal that they have. They're in partnership with Nerd Street Wrestling as well as Pro Wrestling Action, another Central Florida outfit here. But
Perfect.
all great promotions. I'm entering the Nerd Street Battle Royal, and I'm looking to take home the Nerd Street Cup. So that's going to be happening on Saturday the 17th, and
Okay.
then on Sunday, the 18th in Longwood, Florida, I'm going to be working for Mayhem on Mills, which is one of my favorite. It's just like it's like a DIY fun punk kind of experience. It's
Okay.
like
Cool. You'll have
it's
to
a
send me the
great.
information on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I will. It's an intimate crowd, awesome place to be, but it's a lot of fun. It's going to be in Longwood. Catch me
Right.
on social media. Most of the time, I'm hanging around, lurking on Instagram at the Cheese Pro. I'm on TikTok. I'm also lurking over there quite a bit at the American Cheese with a Z, and on Facebook, just the Cheese. So I'm pretty frequent with the posts. So if you want to come by and say hi, throw me a follow. I'm about to start doing a thing where I give my followers stickers in the
There you
mail, like
go. There you
such
go,
a
folks.
old school thing. So if anybody wants to pop on over and if you DM me and say, "Hey, I saw this on the podcast or heard this wherever, do you still giving out stickers?" I will send you a sticker. So be
Perfect. We'll have
ready
to
for
do a
that.
sticker trade. I'll have to send you my ugly face on one. So
Let's do it.
I won't put that one on my mop at work. I'll leave that one actually out and maybe put it on my bookshelf with all my wrestling stuff. But the last hard hitting question here. Now, this is coming from a Wisconsin guy. What are your three favorite cheeses? And then we will wrap this up and you are ready to go.
Okay, number one current favorite cheese is Pecorino Romano.
Okay.
Um, it's smooth and nutty, and it melts nicely. And you put it over some hot gnocchi. It's double chef's
Okay.
kiss.
Okay.
Um, and then the second favorite is that just sharp cheddar, just a
Mhm.
brick of sharp cheddar. You can't go wrong. And
Yeah.
since we talked about it earlier, and it still rings in my mind, is Old Government cheese, because
Nice.
there's nothing better about it, because it was like who I was with, but it's
Yep.
also like it was actually good. And I've
Mhm.
yet to hear anybody on any forum, and anybody can argue with me if they want to, but I've yet to hear anybody on any forum ever say like the government cheese was trash. It was totally good. It was
Mhm.
creamy, had a little bit of moisture to it, but it was very hearty. It was very filling, exactly what it was meant to be. So those are my three.
Perfect. All right, folks. If you want to be just like the cheese and come on your own episode of Friends of the Squared Circle with I or J Rich, just hit us up on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. We're around. We're now doing cameos. I've done 2 so far. I've made $4. That's
Nice.
almost 2 bricks of cheese for me. But again, if you want to be on your own episode, just hit us up. Let's be friends. And it's your boy, Crander Q. Crander Q out.